So Darren Hung wonders about a bit more insights around your thoughts around customer segment experiences across omni-channel experiences. So customer segments and omni-channels, basically.
Yeah. So for us, as I said, we've got 7 different customer segments, which are things like local councils, local governments, state governments, particular parts of the Victorian state government, and a range of other stakeholders, land developers, waterways diverters, and they all require very, very different types of information from us. So waterway diverters are typically farmers or irrigators, and they have rights to take a certain amount of water from a river or a waterway to irrigate their crops. But under their license agreement, they can only take the water if the water levels are at a particular level. So it's really critical for them, literally on a day-by-day basis, that they know and understand the exact level of water from the river or waterway that they're extracting water from, so that they know they can turn the pumps on and they can take water out of the river or the waterway, or they cannot, and they have to wait until the river recovers to some sort of a minimum level. So it really is different for different people. But what we have found that our customers' appetite to take data and exchange data with Melbourne Water. So land developers are a really good example, where land developers might be building a new estate on the outskirts of Melbourne, and they want to be able to share information with us. You know, it might be design drawings, CAD/CAM drawings, and that sort of thing. But to be able to do it on a two-way basis, so that we're marking up and pushing stuff backwards and forwards between them until we get to a point where we go, yeah, we've agreed that's how the new estate's going to be built. Because we have a principle in which that the development of a new estate will have zero net impact in terms of stormwater and rainwater runoff into the nearest tributary. Because what's happened historically is we put a whole lot of roofing and concrete and tar into a new estate. The local waterway suddenly gets inundated with stormwater that it never previously had, and the waterway gets really badly impacted. So through the use of wetlands, through the use of lakes, through the use of a whole range of different things, we're able to keep the rainwater and stormwater within the estate, and therefore have no impact on the local waterway. So very, very different for different customer segments.
Yeah, fair enough. And then just leading into that, Gary Wincole's interested in talking about portfolio prioritization. And do you have, at the start, you were speaking about the intersection of people, process, and technology as the digital journey. So do you have very different processes across the different customer segmentations? And then how do you make sure you then therefore have a fair and equal process around funding and resourcing, taking a balanced view?
Sure. So we have 2 different processes. We have a high-level process, which is really driven by our digital steering committee, which is a whole group of what we call direct reports. So people that report to an executive or a GM, and they get together on a monthly basis and they review the overall portfolio. So I hold the funding at a portfolio level. They make pitches in terms of, they will talk with our business engagement managers. The process is we'll do a project on a page, which is basically a project, scope, benefits, costs, et cetera, but something that's far quicker to do than a detailed business case. If it looks like it stacks up and it's got the general manager's support, and in case of customer, they are engaging with those different customer segments to identify the initiatives that they think are going to bring our biggest bang for buck in terms of greatest benefit for the customer segment. That gets prioritised on an annualised basis, but reviewed quarterly. And Michael, the managing director, will literally sit down and look at the portfolio implementation program at that high level and say to each of the GMs, does that portfolio plan reflect your business priorities? And luckily for me, year on year, they say, yes, it does, because we've implemented that process. We've got a different process for our agile software teams. So agile software teams, we run a product backlog of use cases. Those use cases are down at basically chunked down to a piece of work that will take no longer than 10 days to do. We can then estimate the cost of it. We've then got a value point system we put against it in terms of, is it going to improve compliance, drive efficiency, enhance our customer reputation, cut costs, etc., etc. And we put a value against each of those use cases. And then the use cases are basically prioritized in terms of lowest cost, highest benefit. And we've got a 3PT, product prioritization group that meets on a monthly basis and reviews those, and then effectively inputs those into the next sprint, which we run fortnightly sprints.
Yeah, fantastic. So this is quite interesting. So you're effectively the custodian for digital, interacting with all the different GMs. But it brings us to the subject, in the world we live in today, where as a consumer or customer, I'm a lot closer to a technology function than I would have been 10 years ago, in the same way as you're a lot closer to your customers. You only have to look at, I suppose, online shopping from a warehouse as opposed to having to go to a shop. I can buy things direct from source. Same sort of thing. So what I see in a lot of organizations is almost a bit of a land grab around digital. You've got sales and marketing functions knowing that stuff is done more and more online, saying, well, you know, we're the sales and marketing people. We've traditionally held the relationship with the customer as an external customer, but then technology, which is front and center and really the epicenter of everything these days, is getting a lot more, as I said, front and center. So can you talk to that a little bit, please?
Yeah, sure. So I say it slightly tongue-in-cheek, but digitization is basically driving IT out of the back office and into the front office. So, 100%. You know, the days of IT, you know, just running IT operations, keeping the lights on and those sort of things, those days are, I mean, they still have to be done, but keeping the lights on is a ticket to play in the digital world. Yeah. No one wants to talk to me about digital strategy if one of their core systems is not up and running. So certainly keep
around that is DevOps. Like 25 years ago when I started in the industry, DevOps wasn't a thing because good developers didn't want to do operational support. They just wanted to cut code and hand it over to operations. Such a large thing now.
Yeah, so about 4 years ago, we DevOped IT. So I mentioned those platforms we had around customer, asset management, corporate, and core services. We appointed a technology business partner across each of those, and we pulled, in effect, the IT operations people and the applications development people for those platforms and pulled them together and said, you own the platform cradle to grave. And that worked really, really well for us as a business, because as a business, they had, to coin a phrase, one throat to choke in terms of the technology business partner was 100% accountable for the delivery and the ongoing enhancement, extension, and ultimate replacement of their platform.
Yeah. What advice can you give those on this morning's webinar who might not be the custodian of digital in their organizations and might be coming up against, say, there's a lot of, you know, people running tech departments and functions on this call, but if you're in an organization where maybe the sales and marketing team have really taken control of digital, can you offer any counsel or advice in terms of some of the things you could be doing?
Yeah, I think from a technology perspective, you've got to be seen to be adding value to the business. Yeah. So keeping the lights on is just a given. Yeah. As I say, no one rings me up on a Friday night and says, thanks for keeping the finance system up and running all week. But they'll certainly ring me if it's not working. So I think IT needs to work with the business and understand how it can add value to that business. And where we can add value to that business, then we're seen as, well, it's more than just a back office IT. We're actually creating value for the business in terms of the utilization and the deployment of technology. And that then brings us closer to the business, builds a much stronger relationship with the business, and it really becomes a partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're just on DevOps. We've had a question coming in from Roy asking, do you think DevOps has a viable place in banking?
I think it has a viable place everywhere. Yeah. we're one of the few organisations I've seen that have DevOpted our IT infrastructure. And that's worked really well for us. So I have a program manager which leads all of the infrastructure projects, and I have an IT operations team which keeps all of our infrastructure up and running. And I have a technology business partner that sits across the top of both of those and is accountable for the platform. Yeah. So I can't see any reason why you wouldn't use DevOps, because I just think having end-to-end accountability for a platform means that you move away from the I'm running a project and I throw it over to the fence to the IT operations guys, and we may not have transitioned to support properly, and the documentation might be poor, etc., etc., etc. If people know that they're going to be accountable for running a piece of infrastructure that's being developed, they'll generally develop in a higher quality manner.
Yeah, more owning that product, basically.
Correct, that end-to-end.
Yeah, 100%. That leads me on to something else that I've been considering a lot, is what is the future of the CTO role? Because, COVID's definitely been an accelerator for increased digitalization. We've all been, working from home, or maybe we've been living at work. And how do you actually balance the old school view of the CEO's view of, oh, my email's not working, get onto IT, versus the future of the CTO role? And should it be a bit more of a split between the IT ops team and the CTO digital piece? Maybe you can talk to that.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because you're seeing, I'm a CTO and I'm about the only CTO that I really know. All of my counterparts across the rest of the water industry are CIOs. Just a product of history.
CIO many years.
Correct. So we're in the process. I mentioned that customer push around the sharing of information backwards and forwards. That's driven us to re-architect our whole information management strategy. So we've realized that as we share more and more information with our customers, not only in a one-way but a two-way basis, that we haven't got as strong a handle on our information as we need. So what information have we got? Where's the source of truth? Who's the custodian or architect of that information? Who's got update rights to that information? Who are we sharing it with, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, down to quite a granular level. So we are creating an information governance and enablement function, which will sit in IT. And that'll basically be responsible for governing information and for enabling information. So doing the ETLs, the extract, transform, load, out of source applications into data warehouses. We've got an application data warehouse and an operational data warehouse, and making that information available to the rest of the organization and to our customers, but not doing the analytics in IT. So we've made a deliberate decision that I want the data scientists to be as close to the coalface in our business as we can. But we will govern that information, and we will enable that information to be shared through ETLs and making it generally available through websites and portals. But the actual analytics of that'll be done by our customers or done by our data scientists that are in our business.
So I often, outside of technology-driven businesses, I still think we don't see enough of, call it CIO, CTO, digital officer, whatever the title. So as you say, it's more around what you're actually doing. But that transition into CEO, we still see a lot of CFO to CEO, but not so much the tech leadership outside of tech companies, as I said. So what's your view around how we can shift that paradigm in the future, and any advice you can give for people aspiring to go to running the whole business as opposed to the function?
Yeah, you're right. Outside of technology, it doesn't happen often, but I think as digitization becomes more and more pervasive across organizations, and therefore organizations become more and more reliant on technology and technology platforms to deliver their products and services, the people that are accountable for that technology and the delivery of those products and services will be seen as a critical part of how I run the business going forward, rather than, well, I've got a CIO or a CTO who takes care of that. That enabling function, as digital becomes more pervasive, I think will be the catalyst to have more and more, whether they're chief digital officers, general managers, digital business, but digital will be increasingly seen as that's the way we do business, rather than it's one of the channels in which we serve.
Yeah, I think organisations are going to have to take a different view. I mean, clearly the finances and businesses are always going to be critical because the numbers are clearly very important. But I do think as technology becomes more omnipresent across the whole business and really permeates every aspect of a company, we're going to see more of that transition to CEO, and the accounting is going to be clearly important, but the numbers are the numbers. It's, a bit easier to sort of measure.
I agree. I think where I've illustrated a couple of the initiatives that we've undertaking or have undertaken that have completely transformed the way that we deliver products and services into Melbourne. Knowing and understanding not only how that technology works, but how I can utilize and leverage that technology for the benefit of my customers and the benefit of my stakeholders going forward. That will be the critical part of business strategy going forward. It won't be IT or digital strategy. It'll become, and it's rapidly becoming in our organisation, business strategy. This is the way we do business going forward.